Gonna put me in the audio, and then I'm gonna go.
We're both gonna be in the audio,
and then it's on the wrong tab because I accidentally opened that up.
You blew it.
I blew it right day one. Blew it. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was thinking. The professionalism. Isn't it nice? Isn't it nice with the fun little like monogrammed like plates and everything?
Yeah. Now hold on. I'm gonna.
There you go. You're perfectly centered.
Yeah. Now I'm more keen on making sure I'm in the right spot.
But yeah, you've got the nice little thing. I made that this afternoon. I was very pleased with it. And then like
pretty well.
we'll go back to the waiting screen, which I'm gonna get rid of the thing. Oh hey, I didn't put that. I should put that on the actual chat, not the waiting screen. But the waiting screen is just sort of what's going on behind our video cutouts. and everything. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. Paste reference, Streamlabs chat, and then just to check, hey there chat. Yep, there we go. Chat works. Chat's just going to kind of live between us and block out the unimportant parts of us, which is everything but our beautiful faces. Welcome to episode 10 of Quest Board Gaming. A vodcast? I'll just call it a vodcast. Sure, that's a term still that people know and use, that the cool hip kids are about. That's the new tech.
You can download it onto your iPod.
You can download it onto your iPod by ripping it from YouTube. My name is Steve. I'm joined by my illustrious co-role player and other oftentimes GM Brandon.
That's right.
And this is where we talk mostly about TTRPGs. There will be board game content here eventually, but we talk mostly about TTRPGs. And man, if we could go more than a couple weeks without some new fucking WotC bullshit happening and just waylaying us, we have to talk. So we're going to talk about non-WotC based systems. Right?
Yes,
that's what we're going to talk about.
In celebration of the leak of the new OGL, we are going to talk about other shit you can play other than Dungeons and Dragons.
But let's start this off with the open gaming license. And what that is. That's what the OGL is. You're going to hear that acronym a lot. And specifically OGL 1.1, which is the leaked document. It's not been officially released by WotC. Leaked document of how they handle what's called the open gaming license. Now, go on.
I'll just start it off by saying this. The silence from WotC is deafening.
Yeah, right. Because if it was wrong, they'd be like, "This is not it."
If this was fake, then they would have come out and said so already.
Yeah,
it's clearly something that has existed inside WotC, and
probably for a while now. Honestly,
yeah. In fact, Kickstarter came out and said that yes, they confirmed they negotiated with Hasbro regarding the royalties that people would get from having D&D based Kickstarters on their platform. They would get a better deal, and I think it's the really, really dumb. I think it's WotC shooting themselves in the foot. They've literally de-incentivized people, having third-party people support their systems. And I'll just say this is like, because I don't know how much we want to get into this thing, because
we're going to get into it a bit. I decided
this whole community is beating it to death.
We simply have to, for those that don't know, and we have to really get into some aspects that people talk about or people don't talk about. But go on.
I'll just say this: this new OGL is so terrible that I will not buy another Wizards of the Coast D&D product until they launch a new OGL that is the previous OGL, but with the words irrevocable added to its stipulations.
Yep.
That's full stop.
Yeah.
No more D&D product. And that's coming from someone who has paid thousands of dollars.
Thousands. Both of us.
Thousands of dollars for Dungeons and Dragons content.
Yeah, and to be clear,
and 5th edition content, I should specifically say.
Yeah, specifically 5th. I bought a lot of 4th edition when it came out.
Every 5th edition book in this household.
Yeah, and I have every 5th edition property that you can buy on D&D Beyond. 100% of them.
I will say this: that copy that we have of the Spelljammer, now that that printed version is no longer available. That's going to be a collector's item.
It's going to go up in value with the extra
scandal.
the extra racism, the dash of racism.
Yes. I'll be able to sell that to some middle school incel.
What's up, Ronan?
Who wants to pay a lot of money.
But so the OGL, right, and the open gaming license, we're gonna get into this in a little bit on it, but I'm going to run the ad now so that it plays rather than in 45 seconds.
Gotcha.
And then we'll be back to talk about this, but we'll be talking about it during the ad. To any of our subscribers.
Roden, we want to hear your thoughts about this too.
We want to hear your thoughts about it. But we got a lot to say about that, and then other better systems. Let me click to run the ad. The only problem I hate about the run the ad system in Twitch is it's not like instant. But now it's happened. So for those that are watching this on Twitch, an ad is playing now. For those that are watching it on YouTube, you just get the little extra behind the scenes. These get uploaded on YouTube literally right after we finish it. Otherwise, I will forget and I will feel bad about it. And so it's much easier to upload them. But separately from that, which we're not really going to bring up because I think it's going to confuse things. Wizards already tried this in 4th edition when they made a lot of changes in 4th edition, so they needed to update the license to include those editions, and it was wildly unpopular, and the reason Paizo exists. So, like, what do they think is going to happen? Do they think that the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that they just canceled 5 video game projects that were in the process, probably because they couldn't negotiate themselves better terms for how much money they would make off the games, since they seem to be
canceled what?
They had 5 video games in development that used D&D in some fashion or another, or in the licensed D&D universe, and Hasbro just killed 5 of them. Not all of them, obviously not Baldur's Gate, but like, but like, I'm guessing they couldn't negotiate better terms, and that Hasbro's desperately looking to wring money out of this, and maybe they're playing a peak game, or maybe they're looking to sell off the property, and so they're trying to hurt it. And then do a tax rebate and give themselves an excuse to sell, and then sell on its potential and say, well, you can reinvoke this. But yeah, 5 game. I don't know which games exactly. I didn't dive too deeply into the article. I just got, and it doesn't specifically say, they didn't announce specific reasons, but you know, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this whole OGL thing, are we back online, by the way?
We are now officially back online, or live on Twitch. The OGL, so the Open Gaming License, for those that don't know, was started in 2000 when Wizards of the Coast bought Dungeons & Dragons from TSR. A whole other conversation about TSR can exist, and Wizards of the Coast buying it. But Wizards of the Coast helped usher in one of the biggest expansions of Dungeons & Dragons in 3rd and 3.5 edition, and had the Open Gaming License, which was basically, you know, this D20 system and these like mechanics with like spell slots and leveling and all this stuff, and a lot of the words that we use, not all of them, but like a lot of them, like our classes and stuff, you can just use that. Everyone can just use that to create it, and it created a massive wave of TTRPGs that were published that used a D20 system, which only then serviced Dungeons and Dragons, this sort of banner child for that system, right?
I mean, if you wanted to run any of the extra third-party stuff, you had to have the core.
Well, system. Not only that, but like you could have stuff that was unrelated to D&D and still used D20. And had whole separate classes and stuff, and pick and choose what you wanted. And again, there's certain things that Wizards has always kind of held on to, like, you know, if your book is unassociated with D&D but uses the D20 system but has, I think, beholders in it, like there might be something there. But again, Wizards by itself, before it was purchased by Hasbro, was not really that litigious. It was too busy to be litigious.
TSR was litigious.
TSR was litigious, and so it was a nice turn up. And then Hasbro consumed Wizards, right? And then since then, they've been trying to worm their way out of this sort of endearment to the community that was the original Open Gaming License. And so in 4th edition, they tried something, it didn't work out, and then Paizo was created and released Pathfinder. Not just because they didn't, partially because they didn't like the way the rules were going in 4th edition, and partially because there's nothing that Wizards or Hasbro could do, right? Because they weren't they were obviously basing Pathfinder off of a lot of stuff that existed in 3rd edition, which had an open gaming license that let people make content that used a lot of similar things as Dungeons and Dragons. And now this leaked document of an update to the OGL has heavy restrictions on what can be used, heavy income restrictions on what can be used. What was originally just looking like it was like, listen, if you're a large enough corporation to make like $750,000 a year annually, we're going to want to talk to you about how much money you're making with this product and maybe work out a licensing deal. And now looks like they're going to, instead of you just being able to do that, and if you become profitable and it becomes a thing, and you become, Paizo or fucking Cobalt Press or something, you can have that conversation, right? Instead of setting like really clear terms that are just like, hey, maybe kick us like 2% of your net income after cost, or like as part of the licensing or anything. It looks like they're going to be extremely controlling and limiting of who is able to even be permitted to use their shit.
They're saying if you make over $750,000 gross,
not
net, gross, 25%.
25, and that's a huge licensing.
That's
fee.
Insane.
Well, because
if you're let me just put it, 750 gross is the total amount of money the company pulls in a year, not before expenses. So if you think about that, that's not factoring in the fact that they're paying for printed products or paying employees. So suddenly these companies are severely hamstrung.
To give you an idea of the hope for profitability on a company, and I'm just going to use $1 million because it makes it easier, because we're dealing in quarters. A company that makes $1 million gross is hopefully in the publishing industry making about $400,000 profit after all of their costs. That is an extremely hopeful number. They're likely are making about $300,000.
A lot of these companies have significantly thinner margins.
But like, let's say they're doing the best, right? They're really killing it, because TTRPG retail is not the same as like clothing or like supermarket stuff. It's got a much smaller margin.
Very niche.
But they're hopefully making $400,000 in profit. If you do 25% of the gross, that's $250,000 that now goes. Now you're down to $150,000 profit. And that's in the best case scenario where you're able to pay everyone normal salaries, and that's your expansion plan. That is ridiculous. That is a ridiculously high licensing fee. Disney doesn't take that. You can sell Disney merch, officially licensed to Disney merch, and you can sell that shit on Etsy with like a 10% on it, which is more expensive than it probably should be, but like fine. Like that's at least a number people can expect. 25% is robbery, and it's 25% off their most successful property. That's the wild thing. It's not like they're like sitting there and being like, well, are they almost entirely using our product and they've based a video game on it, but all of the systems and the world is in our product, right? All of the creativity. They're literally publishing a game called Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the game, right? And everything. Then you could be like, okay, well, you contributed a lot creatively, but like realistically, they're just a basic rule system, and almost everyone that publishes off of them is creating everything else from scratch. And they could easily do that with a number of different rule systems. And so D&D is basically charging because they're the most popular TTRPG. They know they have the biggest audience. And so they're like, do you want this gate of people? You got to pay up significant money.
Yeah, well, I think, especially given how the community at large has responded to this, I think it's really safe to say that WotC, or at least WotC's lawyers, have significantly overestimated brand loyalty.
Yeah,
I almost see no one arguing in favor of this, except for I've seen a handful of troll comments on videos.
Yeah, there's troll comments, but you're not seeing YouTube videos. You're not seeing tweets or any content that isn't wildly against this. Like, that's the thing. You're not seeing, this isn't arguing over whether the DCEU is a good cinematic universe or whether Elon Musk is even a genius, which he's not, right? It's literally such a bad play that this is arguing for loot boxes. That's why it's like, well, loot boxes are good actually for gaming. Would be how out of pocket you would have to be opinion wise to agree that this makes sense for Dungeons and Dragons.
It completely ignores the benefit that D&D has gained from the fact that people have been able to publish content easily for the platform.
The amount of engagement that it's brought is wild.
Yeah, I mean, and you could say, well, this is WotC's. I think if you could point to a mistake that WotC's making, it's that they are not publishing enough material.
Yeah, it's their fault, arguably.
If they wanted to bite into this market, they could grow. They could hire more writers. They could publish more content in a greater, diverse space. They have that ability. They have the money to do it. They just don't. Because they don't want to reinvest the money that they're getting in their profits into this.
Think about this: 5th edition has been tearing up the RPG market and absolutely doubling, tripling, quintupling, dectupling the amount of player base through apps like Roll20, through online gaming during the pandemic and everything like that. It's been tearing up the market. We are just getting a D&D movie in 2023. That's how bad Hasbro has mismanaged this as an entire system, is that in 2023 we're now getting that movie. Baldur's Gate isn't officially out yet. It's still in pre-release, right? Like they dropped the bag so severely on monetizing D&D in the places that they could make gobs of money by owning the property, by owning the IP. Yeah. And so now they're turning and they're looking at all of this money that's being spent with these third-party publishers and ignoring the fact that everybody that buys shit from third-party publishers, almost all of them in some degree, if not significant degree, and it's almost a scaling equal portion. The more third-party shit you buy from third-party publishers, the more likely you just buy everything from Wizards, right? Yeah.
Like if you have, there's like levels of depth you're going. You're talking like surface level is just buying Wizards products. Then you get a little deeper. You start buying like Kobold Press and maybe a few like Mage Hand Press or Hit Point Press. And then you start like digging down deeper and deeper until like
you're in drive-through RPG all the time.
RPG, you're getting old school. You're getting old OSR style games.
You're getting older editions, re-releases of editions of older versions of D&D, right? You're buying this shit, and you're buying this. And again, when I say that it scales together, when both faders go up at the same time because they're connected, is that the more invested you are in purchasing whether it's third-party or third-party D&D content, the more likely you are to have in the back of your mind, well, I can't not have the official stuff too, right? Like not that I loved Spelljammer, not that I love everything that came out from Wizards over the course of 5th edition, but like I ended up eventually obtaining everything on D&D Beyond simply because once I got to more than half of it, I was like, well, I might as well fucking complete the set, right? And I'm grateful that my annual subscription, I only for the Dungeon Master stuff, and I've only bought a few books. Well, it's been owned by WotC. Yeah, I will absolutely not be renewing all of that stuff. And I will, in fact, be encouraging people on ways that they can utilize official D&D product for completely free. And give WotC zero money if they still want to play that system, but they don't want to give the company money because they don't deserve it unless they respond to this with fuck our bad. I guess it's just a completely open gaming license again. That's what we need to be.
There needs to be no change. I mean, I will not tolerate. Like I said, I don't even know at this point. This license is in such bad faith and bad spirit that I don't even know if I'd take back the old license. Like I said, I
need an ironclad license that says you can't pull this again.
I need a license that protects people from future shit.
And it's so wild to me because there are so many ways they could have implemented this in a way that wouldn't have bothered the masses, right? They could have said that if a certain number is rang, we may reach out to negotiate a licensing fee based off of the relative dependency on our content for your content, right? Yeah. Like there's so many ways that they could have phrased this in a way where it's like, all right, get that money.
Or they could just also start doing shit like fucking contracting these companies to produce official D&D products.
How are they not?
Just go to Cobalt Press and be like, hey, you guys produce a fuck ton of material every year, way more than we produce actually.
Yeah.
Why don't you actually make an official D&D book for us, and you'll get to sell it, and we're gonna put the D&D branding on it.
We talked about this. We talked about this when WotC bought D&D Beyond, and I was like, you know what the cool way for WotC to do this would be is if they opened up D&D Beyond to the big third-party publishers like fucking Cobalt Press, and they were like, hey, we'll put your books on this. All of the digital sales from this, we get a percentage. You get the rest.
Almost like with D&D Beyond coming out with one D&D. I'm thinking, this is an idea that I'm just having now. It's almost like they're trying to diminish third-party content because they know they're not going to support it on D&D Beyond, and they know that other platforms like Roll20 are going to support that material, and they want a cut of that pie.
There are tons of people. I think what they want to do too, as they come out with their VTT, whenever that eventually comes out too, with their virtual tabletop, I think they want a legal backing for them pulling D20 content off of Roll20, their major competitor.
That actually kind of goes into another thing that's on the OGL, and that is that if you publish something under the OGL, Wizards then has the right to use your material in perpetuity without having to pay royalties, which can then also go into D&D Beyond. They're like, oh, you publish something that we think is cool, we're just going to put it on D&D Beyond. Put it on D&D Beyond, charge for it, and you don't get anything for it,
which is absurd. That's an absurd thing to do. It is the worst version of the creator what was it called? But I think Bethesda's tried to do it a couple times. Blizzard's tried to do it a couple times. The creator store modding community. See, that's the thing, is that Hasbro is just now experiencing something that video game companies has, Creator Club, thank you, Riot, have experienced over and over again, which is once you have the door open, you can't close it again and have nobody notice. And it's funny because if you asked people, it's like, hey, would you like this content in D&D Beyond? We take a percentage because we put it on D&D Beyond. Like, we have to make it work on D&D Beyond, but the rest of it goes to the content creator. All that would have done is increase subscription services to D&D Beyond and sales to that. Absolutely, that's what that would have done. What a convenient fucking marketplace.
It's almost like they could have worked with the community to be like, hey, why don't we all work together to make money?
Make tons of money.
Instead they're just like, fuck you, community, we're gonna take your money.
All they're going to do is push people like yourself, push people like myself, push their whales out of purchasing their official content, and encourage us to not only not play their system, but if we do run into people that play their system, encourage them not to play their system, or to for lack of a better term, steal from them, like openly steal from them. I have no problem with whatever money you do or do not want to pay corporations. Eat the rich, right? But what I do think is that there is a way that a corporation can make a bunch of money and make money for other people. And they could have gone that route, and they would have all made a bunch more money than they're ever going to see from a way like this. So it would, to me, if Hasbro goes forward with this, if this actually gets published as a new open gaming license and they go forward with this, It is them saying, I want Dungeons and Dragons to fail in 5 years. I want it to become unprofitable, and I'm going to sell the asset.
Has to be the single most unpopular thing to come out of Wizards of the Coast. Almost, conceivably ever.
Possibly ever.
I've never seen the community so homogenized in their opposition to this.
Yeah.
And
even the racists are upset.
Even the racists are upset. No, some of them are corporate bootlickers, so they're all just like, no, this is WotC. They own this. They can do whatever they want. Never mind that the Supreme Court has already ruled that you can't actually own game mechanics and rules.
Yeah.
But there's a few other things. A lot of the discussion has missed the fact that WotC may not even be able. So they're trying to state that the previous 1.0 OGL is now a deauthorized license. They may not even have the power to do that.
Yeah, that might not be legal based off of the terminology of OGL. There's lots of YouTube videos you can find with lawyers talking back and forth about that.
Well, one of the interesting things is the original author of the OGL, Ryan Dancy, I think is his name, has actually straight up come out and said that it was the intent behind how it was written was that it would be irrevocable. That only in the situation in which you violate certain prospects of the thing can you have your individual right to use the OGL revoked. And that would be if you started using Wizards of the Coast IP. So for example, the OGL does not let you use it does not let you use like Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or any of these realms and spaces and characters. It just makes a system reference document of what character classes, spells, monsters, and mechanics you can use that are in the rule book.
And you can get that freely online. You just type in OGL SRD. Open Gaming License Systems Reference Document, Dungeons and Dragons or WotC or whatever else you want to add on to your Google search, and you'll find exactly what anyone can use or has been able to use. I agree with you, Riot. If it gets released, no matter how legal Hasbro says that it is or what the end result will be, it will go to court because there's no question. Someone brought up that that it is open that not Knights of the Disney's MMO are so EA's MMO, the Old Republic, which is using a licensed Disney property, Star Wars, uses the SRD, which means that EA, one of the biggest publishers, and Disney, one of the biggest licensed IP properties through Star Wars, would have to give money to Hasbro under this. Now, it may not be a lot of money, and again, Hasbro can always negotiate for specialty terms, but like when you have it reaching into so many different markets, even outside of tabletop, and you're not just punching down on a bunch of indie creators, right? You actually have corporations and businesses that will put the money in, and a bunch of probably D&D playing fucking lawyers that are like, no, we don't want this. And when we say Wizards and WotC and we're attacking this, to be clear, I think that I would be willing to put all of my annual salary on the fact that 98, 99, potentially even 100%, but the vast majority of people that work for Wizards of the Coast do not want this. This is not a decision that they got to make. They didn't come in and everyone there is defending it or anything like that. And I'd be willing to put that same amount of money on the fact that this was leaked by an employee at Wizards of the Coast that works for Dungeons and Dragons, because they saw this and they're like, oh, this cannot happen. If it's the executive layer of Wizards and Hasbro, or it's just Hasbro, because they own them one way or the other, that is a very corporate, very nearsighted profits now kind of play. That looks good on a balance sheet for 2 quarters until the business starts failing. It almost feels like a CEO that's going to parachute out of the business maneuver, where there's a bunch of predicted profits that juke the stock up a little bit, and then after they after they falsely inflate the stock and the actual earnings come in and they're down, that CEO the CEO that parachuted out at the stock high is done, and the CEO that's replacing them has to deal with the fallout, gets fired, and then a third CEO comes in. We see this in media companies a lot. But yeah, it's definitely going to go to court. There's no question it's going to court.
So now that we've kind of talked about I believe the
we
one
could
that
spend
finally came
all
out from
2 hours
Gizmodo ended up being like a 96-page document.
Yeah,
it's considerably more in depth than previous OGLs.
Of course it is, because it's more restrictive and gimmicky so that it can trick people into giving them money, as opposed to a simple, here's the system. Use it.
So let's talk about, I think now is the perfect time to pivot. We don't want to give WotC money by force. We give them money because of good products are being made by people, and the people who are making those products are the people who are getting most of the money from us purchasing those products.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now is the time for us to pivot to what can we play other than Wizards of the Coast products? What can we play other than D&D? Because you know what?
There's a few other games out there.
There's just a handful.
It certainly couldn't be in the thousands, could it? Oh, it is in the thousands. It's literally in the thousands. They're literally now. What do you want to start with, Brandon? What do you want to start with? Because these are all systems that you can use to play from companies that behave better than Wizards of the Coast.
So I'm going to start off then with another company that has their own open game license that is pretty wide open. And that is Free League. And I've talked about them on the show before. This particular game I'm going to talk about is Vassen.
Yeah, baby.
So Free League has all of has a rule system that it's been using for some time that is derived from its original game, I think was Mutant Year Zero. And since then, like, Free League has actually gone on to become one of like the biggest users of licensed content, of creators of licensed content. They have a licensed Blade Runner game. They have a licensed Alien game based on Ridley Scott's Alien. They just recently acquired the license for Lord of the Rings RPG.
Yep, they got the Lord of the Rings role playing and the One Ring role playing.
So there's two. Yeah, there's Lord of the Rings and the One Ring. I have the One Ring over here as well. Their games are beautiful. The rules are pretty coherent. I believe it's like a D10 system primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And so like this one, the premise behind it is you are a member of like a secret society of people who have gained the special sight in which you can see these magical beasts. And the premise behind it is that it's kind of like a Nordic horror mystery in which you have to go out to investigate these events that are happening, determine what monster is causing it, what Vassen is what the creatures are called, and then banish the creature using a ritual. And their system that they use for all of this, the Mutant Year Zero system, is on an open game license, I believe. Don't take my word for it, but I'm pretty sure it is on their website.
It is.
Great. So that's the first one that I would start
and
with.
I'm going to expand upon that for Free League. So Vassen is amazing, and as Brandon mentioned, they also have tons of licenses for things like Lord of the Rings and Alien and other various properties. But if you're talking about Blade Runner as well, but if you're talking about like current indie darlings, you're talking about Into the Odd, you're talking about Morkborg, and then Cyborg, which is also like that. You're talking about Tales from the Loop, and other like very popular, honestly very popular indie RPGs. They're like, okay, so the indie RPG space.
I'm just going to bring over a few more Free League products that I have over here.
Yeah.
Some of which you just mentioned. So, of course, I have Into the Odd here.
Great game.
We have Merkborg.
Great game.
Which is translates into the word Dark Fort.
Yeah, it's just it's a very dark fantasy RPG.
By the way, I want to just show the interior of this for a second. Hopefully, it doesn't get us in trouble. But like, they have such a really great layout. That's just like really creative in its design. Like the page where you get the weapons is literally just someone being stabbed through with every different weapon, and then like the description of the damage of every weapon listed.
Yeah, they have a lot of fun with the aesthetic of it. The reason I bring them up though is because when considering RPGs, imagine that Wizards of the Coast and D&D specifically is fucking like Disney in the cinematic universe now. It's Star Wars and it's MCU, right? It's the big blockbusters that everyone knows about. And there is nothing wrong with deeply enjoying Dungeons and Dragons and consuming a bunch of it. And then imagine that something like Free League is more like A24, a critically acclaimed series that if you pay attention to who makes and produces and gets films out, you're like, they're doing some really good stuff there and everything. And you'll know a lot of their titles, but you won't know them like the mass populace knows MCU. That's what a lot of the RPGs that we're going to bring up are like, is they're like cool indie studios that have a lot of films that people might have heard of and some people see and swear by, and they try to get all their friends to watch them and everything because they're great movies, and they'll be like, it's this studio or it's this like distribution house that's like making the new future like really cool stuff that may not be everyone's taste, but it's still a lot of people's tastes and is undeniably like the future of film.
So Symbaroum, I'm going to show about this one really quick. Symbaroum's another dark fantasy game from Free League. This one is about like these people who have been driven out of their homeland by a necromancer king who has used an army of undead to chase these people from their lands, and now they've been chased into the wilderness to survive. That's a really cool one. But I'm going to go grab another one here now, which I only have the core book for, but there are countless other games that use this game's system.
Yeah, let's jump into the other big titan of indie RPGs,
Apocalypse World.
Yep.
Or for those out there who are probably familiar with the saying "powered by the apocalypse," that is from this game right here. And there are countless games out there that use Powered by the Apocalypse. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is a Monster of the Week and Dungeon World are both very popular Powered by the Apocalypse systems. But Steve, do you know any others off the top of your head?
So Powered by the Apocalypse, you've got Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms. You've got Masks, Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms. Kids on Bikes is Stranger Things, but an RPG it's not like a licensed Stranger Things thing, but it's Stranger Things is the vibe, and 80s kind of horror things. Kids on Brooms is what if you wanted to play Harry Potter, but you didn't want to give a turf any money. So you give Kids on Brooms. Masks is a coming of age thing. Isn't Blades of the Dark? Blades of the Dark is Powered by the Apocalypse, isn't it?
I think it is. It is. I think it has its own thing. It says Powered by the Dark. Is Blades in the Dark?
Blades in the Dark. No, Dark PBTA. Powered by the Apocalypse and Blades in the Dark. No, I think it is. I think is Blades considered PBTA? It's heavily modified, but the bones are PBTA. So if it's not PBTA, it's close, right? Like that kind of thing. So a good example of how you would play a PBTA game versus say like a Dungeons and Dragons Roll20 system.
Pardon me. I'm still here. I'll just say you step away for a second.
Yep. A good example of this is that PBTA, Powered by the Apocalypse, is an open system that uses 2d6, and you can modify that in a lot of ways. But in the case of, like, say, Kids on Brooms, right, which is the sort of Harry Potter inspired RPG, PBTA has you take the polyhedral dice, the D20, the D12, the D10, the D8, the D6, and the D4, and put them into different character ability stats. And so that's the die that you can roll, and you can roll that alongside something, and roll that alongside something, and you have a number you're trying to hit, and you have like different mechanics to help you get to that number and different bonuses to help you get to that number. But the higher numbers, you want to have your bigger die pool in, and the lower numbers, you want to have stuff. Other PBTA games do a 2d6 system where you just roll 2d6 and you add a stat to it. 2d6 has been used in various systems over various times, and is oftentimes referred to multiple different systems, because the idea is that you're rolling 2d6 to meet the challenge or the conflict between it. But in Kids on Brooms, right, it means that if you're a very physical wizard, right, like you want to do a lot of like athletic things, like play their whatever their knockoff of Quidditch is, and everything, you might want to put your highest die stat in that aspect, and it makes the likelihood of you being able to overcome higher challenge ratings with that dice. But on the flip side, it has like an explosion mechanic. So if you hit the highest number, you get to re-roll again. And so if you put a D20 into something, you only have a 5% chance of getting a 20. If you put a D4 into something, you have a 25% chance of hitting a 4. So maybe a lot of things that you might do occasionally, but like middlingly, you want like one of your lower number dice so that you're more likely to be able to get over what you would get on an average of like a D6 or a D8. So like, as you can see, there's strategy in kind of how you lay out your character, and everything. And the same thing happens with Kids on Bikes. Masks is great. PBTA is a great system for, I want to tell a genre story, and I'm not planning to play this for 3 years, and everything. I want to tell a campaign with an arc and a story and character growth and everything like that, and it has a beginning, middle, and end, and then it's done.
I also believe the new Avatar of the Last Airbender is PBTA.
What, the most successful TTRPG ever on Kickstarter? That Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG? Yeah, it's absolutely a Powered by the Apocalypse game. And also, so hopefully that
Blades in the Dark.
Yeah, baby.
Game. Been wanting to play this for years. A lot of this is my pile of shame of RPGs that I bought and I wanted to play and haven't gotten around to.
So I'm going to bring up an RPG.
Okay.
Brandon, and this one I'm going to kind of run through. I think this was played either on Critical Role or on the Adventure Zone, or both. And it's an RPG called Honey Heist, which is an independently one-page RPG. So if you go onto the internet and you type in one-page RPGs, you're going to be driven to a site called Drive-Thru RPG, and that place is going to have a ton of things done by Grant Howlett, who is a master of the one-page RPG. And I'm just going to read the intro. It's HoneyCon 2017. You are going to undertake the greatest heist the world has ever seen. 2 things. 1, you have a complex plan that requires precise timing. 2, you are a goddamn bear. Roll 3d6 to determine your descriptors, your role and your bear type. You have 2 stats in this game. You have bear and you have criminal. Both stats start at 3. Bear, to maul stuff, run, climb, and shrug off damage. Scare people, and generally do bear stuff. Use criminal to do anything not directly related to being a bear. And then there's a ton of like actions and stuff. But the reason this is called a one-page RPG is because the rules are handwritten and scanned in on one side of one piece of paper. And yeah, you're not going to play a years-long campaign on this, but this will give you a few sessions, and it costs nothing. And it's wildly popular. It's a wildly popular one-page RPG, and everyone at the table can learn it in 3 minutes and start playing, And it has a basic system that's like you have two features, you have some bonuses, you have some stuff and some statuses, and everything. It even has a system for rolling up like how the adventure starts, or like what the core of the adventure is if you need that. And then that's it. It's very different than what we've been discussing, which are more fully fleshed out RPGs, but it's equally as fun at the table, especially for a handful of sessions. And you get to feel good about completing a story instead of it falling apart after several weeks, months, or years, which is really nice. So that's the one I'm going to bring up. But if you look at Grant H, one-page RPGs, if you type that in, you're going to get stuff about orcs, you're going to get stuff about Warhammer, you're going to get stuff about every individual, you're going to get a goat one, every individual, and they love just coming up with like a 4 bullet point rule system and a scenario, and then being like, have fun playing this. This is fucking great. Okay.
I'm going to bring up another, so I still think that we can also talk about how there are ways to pursue that dungeon crawler experience with other games. The first one I'm going to bring up is a game called Print Weaver.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a unique game in that the premise behind how you make your characters, it's classless and levelless. You literally take your fingerprint and put it on the piece of paper, and then the game tells you how to read your fingerprint to determine what class you are and what your abilities are. So on the back it says, as the print weaver looks over your fingerprints, she glimpses adventures yet untold. Take up the mantle of an immortal traveler caught in a loop of infinite revival by the handmaidens of Providence. Leveless and classless, your traveler's abilities are based on your own fingerprints patterns. Delve treacherous ruins, drain monsters of their ink-sodden blood, and find new ways to die and live again with a shadow at your heels. So that's a little one called Print Weaver, but I'm going to move quickly from that one to one other one that I've been really wanting to play for a while, and that is Heart, the City Beneath. And this is kind of a horror-themed dungeon crawl. And if you've ever heard of Spire is the original game, and then this is kind of like a sequel spin-off with similar mechanics. But what I really love about this game, and I'm really eager to try, is that when you are creating your character, you actually choose beats. And what I mean by that is you actually like kind of plot out what you want your character to do. And so you have minor beats, major beats, and then zenith beats. And those beats basically are like tools you give your DM to be like, here's the story moments that I kind of want to hit. They're vague enough that they can fit into a lot of potential stories. But I love it because of it's also how like it's tied to character progression. So when you have a beat happen in the game, you have moments of character progression, and then the zenith beat is literally like how your character's story resolves. So you can choose you can kind of choose where your character is going, and give your DM, or we should say GM, Dungeon Master, I believe is WotC.
Specifically WotC, yeah.
So Game Master or Game Mommy, the tools to kind of help you craft your story. With the City Beneath, the premise behind this is that underneath the city of Spire is like an alive magical place that gives you your desires, but it's also there to like lure you in to consume you.
It's essentially a Fey realm sort of situation. So we're about to hit an ad in a couple minutes here. Okay. But I did want to bring up, Brandon, would you think that based off of the one you just described, where it actually gives you kind of character beats and helps tie progression to those and then encourages the GM to use those character beats as growth, would you say that might make you a stronger GM
absolutely.
If you were playing another very popular game that doesn't have those systems in it, but could benefit from utilizing like the themes and aspects of those systems. Would you say that that's true?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things about the world's most popular tabletop RPG is that it actually does not really give a whole lot of instruction on how to actually run a game in really important ways.
Yeah.
It's
big
just
gaps in it. It has a lot really in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it has big gaps of like eloquent table management and story progression that it leaves up to the individuals to figure out on their own, which leads to perfectly fine but less good TTRPG situations. And it's funny because it's almost like there's a bunch of people doing a bunch of content outside of the D20 system that a company could go to and be like, hey, we don't really have anything for this, and your system has stuff for this. Could you maybe make something with us that we contract out, and then we could like retail it, and then you would make money and we would make money, and we'll pay you up front, and then you'll have royalties for it. Or we'll pay you up front a little bit, and then you'll have the main, and we'll take a percentage because we're hosting it on our store and everything like that, and advertising it to our massive customer base. It's almost like some company could have easily implemented that.
It's almost like book publishers who just make contracts with authors to publish their material, rather than creating this insular ecosystem that doesn't really allow outside thought into it all that much.
And with that, we are moving into the ad. It's starting soon.
I'm going to use the restroom. Okay,
yeah, that's fine. Back. I'll talk to the nothing. And so, yeah, the reason we did this is because obviously all of this drama has come up over this. And at first I didn't want to discuss it because I see a bunch of content on it, but using it as a venue or using it as a throughway to discuss other RPGs and other systems and give some people potentially the opportunity to play those other systems. And I don't think we're going to talk about them very much, but like Burning Wheel is a good system for a big fantasy thing. Savage Lands is a good system for a big like sprawling RPG. So there are other systems that work, and assuming it doesn't get tied up and wrongly ruled in the courts, of course, Pathfinder, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons 3.75, based off the open gaming license that shouldn't be able to be revoked and probably won't legally be able to be. But like, we wanted to show that there are all these other game systems, some of which have apps and websites and free character sheet generators and other benefits to things that are not necessarily to the same degree as D&D Beyond, but you have to remember, Wizards didn't make D&D Beyond. Wizards bought D&D Beyond. Someone else saw the opportunity to make a quick reference system that allowed character creation to be simplified, allowed looking up content to be simplified, and allowed it to all be digital in one login space. And those are the same people that made the choice that you could run a campaign in it, and if you bought all of the materials, you could share that material with the campaign people for character creation, right? And so that they didn't have to buy players' handbooks and supplements and everything because you were paying for a much higher subscription. In fact, D&D Beyond is completely free for individual players to create a login, and if they join a campaign with someone, they don't have to pay for any of the materials. The campaign does it up to a certain number of campaigns. I want to say it's 5, it might be 8, but it's a number, right? And so Wizards bought this because there was a ton of market, and it gives you a ton of data back on what your players are actually using because it has classes and species and stuff like that. But for a company that keeps dropping the ball on being progressive and updating its language and everything, and and constantly fumbling it on things like the Hadozi in or Hadozi, or things that include questionable bioessentialism and things like that. It's amazing that they would also want to burn bridges on the business side as well, right? You would think they would want to be the easiest, right? They'd want to play the Amazon game of being so convenient that we forgive them all of their massive and egregious trespasses. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about this, you're talking about a lot of systems. I'm going to go back to the point of this. I'm going to talk about a game called Paranoia. So Paranoia just had a recent Kickstarter to do another updated division. I think there's 2 existing versions of Paranoia, and essentially it's a future dystopian where AI runs the city, and the AI is inherently flawed, but it is illegal to believe that the AI is flawed or call them into question. And it's a very class-based system where it's based off of the colors of the rainbow and based off of what color your character is approved to be. That's the level of equipment and stuff they have. And there's lots of fun call out, and you have clones, and your party has different roles that they take on to fight missions that are given in extremely confusing ways. And the GM of that plays the computer, the AI, and then the party are troubleshooters solving problems. And they have all these different card systems and initiative-based systems and a bunch of fun, but they're a system that's really baked into get a vibe of what kind of entertainment this game's supposed to provide, in this case, future dystopian absurdity, and then have fun with it. And not knowing the rules is actually better for the players than knowing the rules, arguably, because it's more in line with the ethos and the vision, the thesis of the game, right? Because your troubleshooters aren't very confident in this. This is a future where people take pills to regulate their moods, and they don't know anything about history, and all data is filtered through the AI, and the AI is absolutely failing. It's intended to give contradictory information, issue materials to players that they aren't legally supposed to have, and then punish them for having it, right? That kind of a thing. So that's the dynamic. So when you're talking things like Paranoia, you're talking about a third-party game that's been around for like 15 years, 20 years, something like that. It's been around since 2000 in single digits. It provides an excellent thing that you can do as either a one-shot or two-shot kind of thing, or you can do it as a long-going campaign. It is a system built to have like a dozens of session structure in it if you so choose, but it's very entertaining as far as like future dystopian RPGs go. Are you back, Brandon? I think you're still
back now.
Yeah. Do you have, because I have one more that I want to talk about, because I just talked about Paranoia. Do you have another one?
No. I got plenty lined up, but go ahead and go for it. Okay,
I'm going to talk about one more, which is I'm going to talk about Dread. So Dread is a system based off of a Jenga tower. And it's meant to be horror, and it's meant to be tense, which goes along with the vibe of playing Jenga. And the basics of the system is this. Your GM is running some fashion of horror story, and in order to accomplish goals, you must pull Jenga bricks successfully and put them on top of the Jenga tower. And your GM can decide how many bricks things require based off of what you position you want to do. Things require for you to pull them in. That's the system. That's the core of the system. It's so simple. Anyone can instantly learn it. It is a ton of fun. There are repercussions for the Jenga tower falling and everything. And it is a genuinely just enjoyable game that takes nothing. And just to be clear, because I looked this up, Dread doesn't pay Jenga any money for that. Jenga doesn't need their money for that. It just gets people to buy Jenga towers. That's all that it does. Like now it's not a hugely popular game. It might be a different discussion if Dread was, a $10 million, $15 million property, and it's simply not that. But it's such a fun and like light system of how do I mechanically play this game? Oh, I play Jenga. Okay, I know what to do now, right? I 100% know what to do, and it took, Unless someone's never heard of Jenga before, then you got to take the 30 seconds to explain the complexities of Jenga to them. And so it's probably one of the easiest games to learn how to play.
Do with the block?
I take the block without the tower falling over, and I throw it in the garbage. Oh no, I put it on top. Okay. And so yeah, I love Dread. As a guy, I myself can't play Dread because I have a central nervous tremor decision or disorder that prevents me from successfully playing Jenga after like one move. But
I've seen your hand shake. Yeah,
I'm not good at Jenga. But in fact, I'm so not good at Jenga. Multiple friends of mine, as a trolling gift, have given me Jenga.
Now, I'm gonna kind of talk to you, Steve. Do you like anime?
You know what? I do like anime.
You like anime? Do you like fantasy anime, like Ghibli like stories and old school old school RPG, like JRPGs?
Yeah. You know what? I'm in fact on this very channel, I'm playing a inspired by old school JRPG game called Chained Echoes. I'm a big fan of that and Studio Ghibli.
There's a tabletop RPG for that too. It's called Ryuutama.
Ooh, look at that, baby!
Look at that art.
Look at that gorgeous Ghibli style art.
It's got that.
That looks like it's ripped
Ghibli,
right out of Final Fantasy Tactics.
Exactly. It's got both of them jammed together, man. Yeah. And it's and it's not at all based on D20, like D20 system. I mean, there might be multiple types of dice in here, but like the premise behind it is that there's these different dragons that are in the world, and they kind of have like an influence over your character and your journey. Very narrative driven. I haven't gotten too much into this one, but I've heard lots of great things. Another system, if you're looking for something with that JRPG flavor to it, Ryuutama is a great game to check out. And then now on the flip side of that, Steve, do you like mechs?
I do like mechs, Brandon.
Do you like games where you play like a mercenary trying to like make money and stuff like that too?
Yeah, I do kind of like a game where you have to like do some of the survivability in life, but you have more power to influence it yourself.
Yeah. So for that, we got a game called Lancer.
Yeah, baby.
Now, Lancer is another. This is if you're looking for something that's going to be a bit more on the combat crunchy side of things, giving you that really good tactical feel good. Like, give me that tactic choice.
Give me that line of sight, flanking, coordination, pre-planning bonuses and stuff like that. Give me that payoff for my smart combat things.
Exactly. Then Lancer is going to scratch that itch while also letting you pilot all sorts of really cool mechs. Let's just take a peek here.
Almost like we've talked about wanting to play this game before.
No, never.
I've never heard of this from Brandon's lips before in my life.
I haven't shown you most. So like, here's a cool mech you can have.
Look at that! Look at that 6-shooter on that mech.
Right.
Yeah, you want a sweet Western-inspired, samurai-inspired fucking mech with a handgun. Like that's exciting.
Right?
It's every American's dream.
Yeah.
This is every American's dream.
Let's see. There's another. There's some other in here that make me think of Evangelion. I'm trying to find that.
And that's it. That's all we can. I don't want to get taken down from Twitch.
Of the song we can get away with.
Yep.
Give me a second here.
If you don't know what Evangelion is, just go look up the theme song. Oh, that is That is an angel indeed. That is an unsettling creature mech.
Another cool thing about this, there is a website for it called compcon.app, which features tools to help you easily build your own pilot and get the game running quickly and smoothly. Because it's a new system, everyone knows there's going to be a learning curve, but they got some cool stuff out there to help you get started. So the physical copy of this, I believe, is out of print. I don't know if they have a print-on-demand copy available.
But you can buy the PDFs.
You can still get the PDFs. and it is a cool, excellent little
funny
combat game.
You know what's funny, Brandon, is that neither of us between the two of us have brought up World of Darkness at all. One of the biggest boys in the TTRPG space.
I'm sorry, I haven't brought it up because I'm not a fucking edgelord.
Yeah, I know, right? For
sorry.
those that don't know,
who like World of Darkness, I'm sorry. It's just you're all edgelords.
For those that don't know, Vampire the Masquerade, which is both a TTRPG game and a LARP game and has video games attached to it, and Werewolf, which is also in that same world, and a number of games of World of Darkness have live action roleplay versions, have TTRPG versions. It's a wildly popular system in the kind of I want to play sort of grim, high drama, high intrigue kind of games. Very political kind of games. Hugely successful, completely unrelated to that. If that's your vibe, there's tons there. If you've played the Curse of Strahd module from 5th edition multiple times and you're like, I just want vampires, go to that.
You're like, I just want to play Strahd in a world filled with other Strahds. Play Vampire the Masquerade.
If you want to play sexy, damaged young daddies. Another PBTA.
You want that himbo energy.
Another PBTA game that powered by the Apocalypse of Games that's wildly successful that I should have mentioned. Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Huge critical darling. Very exactly. When you hear Thirsty Sword Lesbians, you kind of get what the vibe of that game is, and it's fucking great. If you enjoyed Steven Universe and She-Ra, there you go. Which you should have enjoyed both of those. They're excellent animated series. But Thirsty Sword, it's so filled. The TTRPG world is so filled with other options that, again, you can find websites and apps made by people, spreadsheets made by people, sometimes made by the publishers themselves, like Lancer's case, that help you get to where you need to be, because everyone thinks in terms of, but D&D is what I've played, it's what I know, and I understand that feeling, but we all had to learn it at one point, and it was one of the hardest games to goddamn learn. And most people spend their entire first campaign learning how to play D&D. Mm-hmm. And if you just take that mentality to any other game system, and you know one person that's willing to run it, you're in the same exact boat that you were in. You're in the same space, and you're going to have the same kind of good time at the table, the same kind of fun.
In fact, I'd argue that
sometimes better times.
That you're probably going to have some better times. And I also want to put this out there. I feel like if you like being a responsible consumer and value being a responsible consumer, even in the smallest way. I mean, obviously, there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism.
But there is more ethical and less ethical consumption.
Yes.
There are layers.
There is more and less ethical. True. Yeah. So, there is a contingent of the TTRPG space that is D&D or die. They straight up strongly refuse to even give the possibility for other systems. And I think this moment with the OGL is all your wake up call to be like, one, pull your head out of your ass. You can learn a new system, and you're going to benefit from learning a new system. And even if you do go back to D&D, you're going to take the things you learn from these other systems that you never would have learned otherwise.
Yeah, you're going to take methods of role playing. You're going to take options and ideas of how you used abilities and stuff in other systems and see them. If you run other games and you're worried about running a non-D&D game because you've run like dozens of them, and so you know that in and out, and you're worried about this, don't worry about it. When you ran your first D&D game, you weren't an expert. Probably still, if you're me, you're still not an expert. But like you're ready to expand out. Ethical consumption in this is also important. I'm going to compare this to what I compare everything to: pornography. So Wizards is not that the company behaves as badly as Hasbro, but Wizards is Pornhub. It's the porn site we all know about. We all know about it. We all are aware of it. You can find things on there. Everybody's familiar with it. All of these, almost every one of these other RPGs we've brought up is OnlyFans. You are giving money directly to smaller creators, and it's making a bigger impact. The communities are there. You can just talk with the creators on Twitter very easily for a lot of these games. As long as Twitter still survives. Maybe go back to Tumblr. But speaking of pornography, full circle. But like, yeah, just give them a try. You'll end up finding genres that you like to play more, that these TTRPGs service better, emotions and like vibes and feels that like land better with these systems because they're built to do them. Because Dungeons and Dragons was always a high fantasy combat simulator. It was always a fantasy combat simulator. It evolved over time from being more of a grueling one to more of a superhero power fantasy, which is what 5th edition is. But like, and what 4th edition also was. But at the end of the day, modern D&D is very much that. And if that's the story and the play you're trying to tell, and that's what you want to do, great. And I'm not going to attack anyone for continuing to play D&D. I'm not going to say that, but there's other options.
If you're looking, I'll just say this: if you're looking for an alternative to D&D but still want that same vibe, check out Shadows of the Demon Lord, and their upcoming game that's going to be a little less dark and intense, Shadows of the Weird Wizard.
Yeah.
So those games are not going to be based on D&D, but they have their own systems.
But they are going to feel like that. And assuming
offer that same kind of energy, if that's what you're looking for.
And we haven't mentioned them because we mentioned Paizo earlier. Assuming that things don't go incredibly sideways, Hasbro doesn't release this and then somehow is able to revoke the previous one. If you want something that's very like D&D, but not, Pathfinder is there. It's right there for you.
Pathfinder 2nd edition is great.
And 2nd edition is great. It's got tons of tools. It's the opposite of Wizards. It publishes arguably too much content. Yeah. And everything. And so if you want a sci-fi version of it, they publish that in Starfinder too.
Starfinder's great.
So like if you want something that's similar, and it would take so many layers of complication if Hasbro actually releases this new version of the OGL for a court to somehow rule that everything that Pathfinder based it off of, which was a valid open gaming license, is somehow no longer valid anymore.
Yeah. So
yes,
I'm going to go off some rapid fire.
Find the tabletop system that caters to your kinks.
Absolutely.
If that is Mage the Ascension, because it's not quite as, it only edges toward Edgelord, and you're a big fan of edging, Riot, then that's your system.
I'm not here to yuck your yum.
Yeah. This is going to be on the VOD, 100 every part of this. So welcome to YouTube. For people that get to an hour and 22 minutes into the YouTube VOD, the dedicated, they now know that Riles is.
There are a handful of people who will see this ever, possibly. You know, how many views do our old videos have?
The live ones don't have very many. I think the last one had like 40 or 50, the one that was the first version of this. I don't know what the average watch time is. I don't like looking at numbers that make me sad. Anyway.
I'm going to rapid fire a few more systems.
Yeah, give me a couple more systems, and then I got a little challenge for us after that.
Okay. If you still want that, some more of that, like you want that D&D adjacent stuff, but you don't want to go to Paizo's crazy crunchiness, for D&D, you got Worlds Without Number. If you want to go for the stars without the Starfinder, but you want something a little less crunchy, you got Stars Without Number. By the way, both of these have free versions on Drive-Thru RPG that omit a lot of stuff, but have the core rules and tools available. So,
almost like how 5th edition started. It's wild. It's wild that 5th Ed has switched to such a villainous thing. When it started, it was like, oh man, they're really making some great moves to make this more easily playable for people. And
you want to play like a fun, like horror themed adventure? You got Shiver. And that's like talking like making like movie horror. Like you want to like put up a bunch of kids against the slasher villain, or a monster in a house,
recreate the film Slither.
Yes, perfect. Play Sliver on Shiver.
On Shiver, they sound alike.
You want to play a post-apocalyptic mutant game? You got Mutant Chronicles from Modiphius. But the last one is another one of the big ones that we've somehow managed to avoid this entire conversation.
Okay.
And we all know how big a fan of Brandon is of Eldritch horror.
Yeah.
And that would be Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, another hugely popular game.
And here's another cool thing about Call of Cthulhu that I didn't know until recently. They're currently on, like, I think 7th edition for Call of Cthulhu. But here's the thing. When they say 7th edition, they more mean like 7th printing. Each version is not actually a significant redesign of the rules, but a gentle correction, of course. And so what that means is that if you have an older copy of the book, or you're wanting to play an old adventure that was released a long time ago, it's still going to work with the current version and out there. And it's just going to have better language and more clean, streamlined rules.
Now, Brandon, you must be wrong, because it's clearly Wizards that came up with that with the whole 1D&D movement. That they would stop going to editions and just refine rules so that things that had been published previously could still work. That simply can't have existed in multiple different published games for decades now.
I mean, it's almost like other people have been acting in good faith for the industry at large since its inception.
Since a strategy war gamer decided, what if you were individual people? Like a fighting guy. But like a fighting man.
Fighting man.
Yeah.
That's our, by the way, new tabletop RPG coming from Steve and Brandon. Fighting man.
Fighting man. So I have a little game for us to play, and I kind of teased you that this is something that I came up with, and then put no thought into.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Brandon Jamiroquai, I'm not going to give your last name, W. Brandon Jamiroquai W. If you had to come up with a decision-making system, this is a challenge overcoming system, and I mentioned Dread earlier, where they're just like, it's just Jenga, just play Jenga, and then that's how you do it, right? On the spot right now, could you, and if you did, could we maybe spitball a couple different ways that you could literally come up with a mechanic to play through a role-playing game, whether it's single session, multiple sessions, and everything. You don't have to come up with like leveling and all that stuff. Just sort of the core thing. In D20, it's rolling the D20, right? Mm-hmm. And then adding bonuses to it. Mm-hmm. In D6 games, it's 2D6 or 3D6. You roll those dice, right? Certain games have points.
I love those bell curves.
Yeah, right. And so let's talk about coming up with a system in the style of something pretty outside the box or strange. Okay. And then doing this. And we're not collaborating on one. We don't have to investigate these. We don't have to actually like play test them or theorize them to their full extent. Just something that might be a fun way to like create a sort of like challenge and reward system. And if you like, I can go first because I'm the one presenting this game, or you can go first if something strikes you.
Let's go ahead and hear your first idea.
All right, so I'm going to stick to dice, and we're going to call it the Yahtzee system. All right, so the Yahtzee system, for those that have never played Yahtzee before, which is some people, I'm sure, Yahtzee is a game where you have a piece of paper where you're trying to hit different sequences of dice rolls. You have 5d6, and you roll them, and then you see if you get one of the be essentially hands of dice. 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind, where all the dice are the same number is considered a Yahtzee. There's a 3 run straight, a 4 run straight, and everything. And when it's your turn, you roll the dice once, you see the numbers that you have your sheet that shows you what you've already scored, and then you set aside a certain number of die. It's your choice on how many you set aside, and then you re-roll, and you can do that up to 2 times after the initial roll, and that's your turn. And you're trying to make something like a full house where you have 2 of one that are the same and 3 of the other dice that are the same, and stuff like that. So the key here is, in my Yahtzee system, you still have all of the Yahtzee mechanics, 100% of the Yahtzee mechanics. The GM is telling you the difficulty of the thing based off of the likelihood or unlikelihood of hitting that Yahtzee roll. If you hit the Yahtzee roll by rolling those 5d6, setting some aside and everything, and having the 3 roll chance, if you hit that, you automatically succeed. If you get part of the way there, mixed success. If you do not hit that, no success. And if you roll literally, and you can create all different kinds of rules from that. If your first roll has no matching numbers and is not a run, that is a critical fumble. If you roll a Yahtzee, that is a critical success, like a nat 20, and stuff, which would, by the way, be hard to do, because I think that's, to roll a nat 20, it would be 6 times 6. I can't remember how to calculate
really
it.
Absurd.
But it, it's pretty rare, right? Which is why you roll in Yahtzee 3 times and you separate die out to increase that. But if you get the Yahtzee on the 3rd roll, if you get the Yahtzee initially, right, you can play that. The randomization is already there. The dice are already there. It's D6, so you can buy them at any Rite Aid for like a few bucks, and everything. Everyone can use the same set. Or you can use different sets, and such. And you already have a system that's a relatively popular game.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's my Yahtzee-based gaming system.
If we're gonna just be like lifting other systems, my idea that just came into my head would to be do a game of Scrabble as a mystery, a game, and you're all detectives, and when you create a new word, that word ends up being a clue that the DM then has to work into the mystery itself that you then work your way towards.
I fucking love that, because it's kind of like, it's a play on, the players are all doing things and they're like using the words to try and create narration, and then the GM is constantly pivoting the story around the words that kind of come up. That's a great 4-hour evening sort of, or like 3-4 hour evening of fun mystery that becomes a surprise for everyone at the table as they're playing it. So
there's a game in there somewhere. That's
almost a GM-less game. That's almost a GM-less game. That you could possibly do that as a GM-less game, which I love as a concept, as a person that oftentimes GMs. Although I love the trick that they're like, oh, you want to play GM-less games? What's going to prevent you from still technically being the GM of the GM? Knowing all of the rules, helping everyone make decisions, still acting basically as a GM. Just not being in charge of the story. Okay, here's another one. I'm going to call this the Over the Top. I have not planned past this concept. So Over the Top is an amazing Sylvester Stallone movie.
I know,
where he's a truck driver. I know you know, but for the audience, where he's a truck driver who's trying to reconnect with his son, but he's also a competitive arm wrestler. All right, so Over the Top, the game system. Now, if you're dedicated LARPers, we just arm wrestling for it, right? We just arm wrestling for it. But if you are in fact not that, right? What you simply do is that you have you issue each player every session 10 strength chips, and then whenever they meet a challenge, and this would have to be in an over-the-top themed campaign, possibly Oh, what was the Hugh Jackman movie that's basically over the top but with fighting robots? Real Steel. You could possibly do Real Steel with this, but you have 10 tokens, and you kind of hold on to those tokens. They have to be fairly small, so they can all 10 of them could easily fit in the palm of your hand with a closed fist, so that people wouldn't know. And then you and the GM go in and you challenge with those tokens. The GM has less tokens then would be able to defeat all of the tokens at the table. So they have to meter out the tokens too. And everybody decides to put their token bit in their hand, do that, hold their fists up in almost like an arm wrestling pose, and then expose their hand to see how many tokens. And if the player has more tokens, significantly more tokens, that's a success. Player has that. If you have a group of players, that means that the GM is trying to judge how much they want this and what the challenge is of that. You could also narrate that it just simply takes one strength token. You can buy the success automatically for a certain amount of strength tokens, but then you have to do it. You could do this as a token pool, or you could do it individually to players, and then you could, over a long period of time, earn tokens as your characters get more powerful, right? And have more of a successful chance to dominate in the over-the-top themed or Real Steel themed RPG that I just invented.
Are we caring about actual viability of these systems, or are we just going to throw out fun? Because I have a really non-viable.
I do not care.
I love it. Every contest is a game. Oh,
hold on. I want to see Riot. If type your in after Brandon gives this. I'd love to hear your kernel of an idea. Love for you to post that, and we'll kind of talk about it. But you type that while Brandon talks about this system. Go.
This is a really simple and dumb system, but I just thought of this. It's just like, the contests are games of Beyblade. Anytime
I'm fucking here for it. I am so here
with a
Beyblade based system, baby. Yeah. You get the little Beyblade arena. Oh, Beyblade should release that shit. Beyblade should absolutely release.
The Beyblade based battle system.
You could do that for so many like shonen style RPGs, right?
And what you would end up doing is you would be like, you would have like different types of Beyblades that you would have based on the quality of your skill in that thing. So like if you don't have anything in it, yes, it is Beyblades with extra steps, but that's the point. We want to play Beyblades, Riles.
Okay. It is 100% Beyblades with extra steps. That's the point. That's all of these games, is that they're just rolling dice, usually with extra steps.
Exactly. So replace dice with Beyblades, so you have different levels of Beyblades based on your skill in a particular thing. And then based on the difficulty of the thing you're trying to do, they also put up a different Beyblade to fight you.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Okay, I'm thinking, because I don't see the thing.
I'm down with Pog. Yeah, bring back Pogs, Riles. I'm down. Pog-based.
Pog-based? Pog-based would be so good for a TTRPG-based system, because they're easily to transport. They're fun. You can have thematic ones, depending on the genre of the game. Like, there's so many, like, existing game systems that you can use. Like, one of the ones off the top of my head, this is a classic, rock, paper, scissors-based system. All right. Mm-hmm. So here's your rock, paper, scissors based system. You have a very simple mechanic of rock, paper, scissors, and you have to best 2 out of 3 on average. Sometimes you can bet it all on one. Sometimes you can go up to 5, but you're going to succeed slower and everything like that to try to do it. If the player or the person playing against the GM loses, they lose. That's their failure. If they you could come up with things like if you both throw the same thing, right? That's a push and you can back out of the position, or you can double down, right? Like you could create so many different regulations or rules or vibes about the options and how you implement the rock, paper, scissors, and the amount of success or failure you're betting on this game of chance that's also a game of reading your opponent, and everything like that. That what starts out as a game that everyone knows becomes this high tension 1, 2, 3 shoot moment. And in my mind, if I'm playing something like that, So Mega Man, very good, very good. Something around using tarot layout. Either the group builds like a cross or the DM makes a cross and the players have to somehow engage those cards. So Curse of Strahd kind of plays with this in a little bit, but if the game is actually wholly based around it, I like the idea of the group being developed out of it and then the story separately being developed out of that.
I've heard of a game that's actually does this. I don't know the actual mechanics behind it, but it's worth checking out just so you know what they're doing.
Yeah,
it's called Divination RPG.
But
and it doesn't even look like it has, like it's basically just a rule set, and they don't even sell tarot card decks. They just make recommendations and have links to places where you can buy them.
Amazing.
So
amazing.
So you can just like go pick up the game rules and learn how to play. So
yeah, I mean, like, and that's what we're showing off here is that the D20 system with all of the polyhedral high is like card deck for tarot if you need to as well. You're 100% right, Riot. That's what's great about making RPG systems is that you just need a conflict mechanic. And then from there, you can build up is this going to be a one-night game or is this going to be a campaign game? Okay, I need a sense of progression. Obviously, Beyblades is the best combat and conflict mechanic. It's the best anime. It's the best. No, Beyblades is not the best anime. It's not even the best of its type. But like, yeah, you come up with conflict mechanics, and then you decide after that, okay, do I want my conflicts to be able to build? What's important about this RPG? Is it an open system like GURPS, where which it's amazing we didn't bring up GURPS. Is it an open system like GURPS where it's meant to be like applied to a bunch of different genres, or is it more of a like genre specific system?
Riles, I just love this idea of like everyone's sitting around the table and they're like, okay, roll for initiative, and then everyone rolls their dice and then gets up and walks over to the twister pad.
Oh my god. But yeah, I mean, I've seen games. I played in a game where it was a freestyle based RPG on a stream. I played in a stream. Only one Ronan who was in here earlier knows all about that. It was a freestyle RPG system. So you could choose to freestyle, you could choose to sing or rap. It had measurements based off of punchlines and complexity of bars and rhymes and stuff like that. And yeah, that's specifically for people in that community, much like Twister would be for people that are like dancers and acrobats, and like a group of Cirque du Soleil performers would absolutely get down on a drinking and Twister RPG. We're about to hit an ad, so I'm just gonna stop and let like progressing the main our conversation, because the ad is starting soon, which is not specific enough for me, but it will start in a moment. I'm just glad I at least have a heads up rather than barreling through and like being mid-point and people coming back in. If you want to see all those points, though, you can just watch the VOD here. But the ad is in play now. How do you feel about this systems-based RPG game here, Brandon?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I'm still actually like tumbling around my head like, how would you make a Scrabble-based mystery game work? What would the mechanics?
You're thinking about it now, and that's a clever thing. And again, you could take all of these systems we're talking about and just put them in another RPG for like a part of it, right? You're like, okay, for this session, instead of using your character stats or anything, here's my Beyblade arena.
And now remember this. The rules of a system cannot be copywritten, only the way they're expressed. So if you're expressing them differently, like taking Scrabble and using it to play out a mystery story, that's not something that Scrabble can really come after you for, as long as you don't call it Scrabble.
So what you do, by the way, is for that, I'm just gonna spitball this, and Rouse, you may not be seeing the ad because I don't know if subscribers see ads like that.
They don't.
But if you want a good example of this. All right, so you have a person that's invited everyone to a murder mystery, right? A mansion murder mystery, and they're an anonymous person. And when they get there, everyone has a box with like a small note card with their name on it, and they open the box, and they have a bunch of different magazine cut letters that they've been issued, and they're told that they should pull the letters and create the names and see if they can solve the mystery. And the letters are done in like ransom note style, right? Done. You just reinvented Scrabble in a very in-genre take without actually using the word Scrabble. And everything. And it gives them the rules, and they're on cameras, they're on CCTV. So the evil entity knows if they're breaking the rules, and you just sort of rephrase Scrabble a little bit. The same thing with rock, paper, scissors. If you call it like dragons, wizards, and knights, or whatever, it's the same thing. Not that anyone copyrighted rock, paper, scissors, as far as I know. There could be someone that's like, nope, rock, paper, scissors is legally owned by the Mattel Corporation, and they definitely own it. Okay, we're back from the ad. So we've shown off a couple. We've shown off a ton of different RPGs, but different tabletop RPGs. We've talked about how quick it is to sort of quickly flip existing conflict mechanics in other games to create systems. And in the way that there's not a lot new in the literature world or the cinematic world, because there's always someone that's kind of come up with every idea that's in existence, and it's more your interpretation of it, that will be true in the RPG world at this point. There are thousands of RPGs out there that have come up with all different kinds of conflict systems, some absurd, like Beyblade, absurd but also filled with grace and elegance, like the Beyblade conflict system. Others much more thorough.
Mark my words, it's coming.
With card systems and card mechanics. I am 100% confident that someone has created an RPG system using Munchkin cards. Because they already have classes.
You can also just take the idea of, your dice and expand upon them. I think I've talked about this before. Dungeon Crawl Classics uses a thing they call the dice ladder, and they've introduced new dice. So for any of you dice goblins out there, you're going to want to play Dungeon Crawl Classics because you get things like D7s and D5s and D14s and D16s and D7. I already went over the D7, but still,
you get all these fun new dice that you can roll, and because they're not the 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20, a lot of the mechanics can hew closer to those things and still be different enough because they use a different core mathematical calculator, which is a differently numbered die.
You got to make your own D69, right?
You got to make your own D69.
You got to be the person to create it.
You should immediately go and trademark and copyright the D69, patent it, head to the lab. That's right, patent that shit, and then release it. And there's only 2 dice in that set. There's the D69 and the D420, baby. What a terrible RPG that sounds like. The RPG is the game Pineapple Express. Anyway, but we've shown you how to do that. I think for the end of this broadcast, the most important thing to understand about this is that, and I hear this a lot. Because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I deeply love it. I want to play every character. I like some of the modules. I like creating my own worlds in it. I'm a huge fantasy fan. I love its vibe. I am happily willing to stop spending money with them if they get greedy, if they get monstrous. I've already stopped buying supplements wholesale from them for unrelated to business racism that I would like to see change before I'm willing to give them more money. And this is just further pushing me out of the hobby, or of playing that system. But the key here is not to burn down Dungeons and Dragons and walk away from it and go again. It should be fought in the trenches against this open gaming license. You should be tweeting about it. You should be giving. You can go to D&D Beyond right now, sign up for their Unearthed Arcana, which is their beta testing, which they are using to test the next version of D&D, 1D&D, which is sort of like the continuous D&D, and everything. Their next,
it's basically the Windows 10 of D&D.
It's their 6th edition, essentially. But their ongoing D&D, and you can sign up to give feedback, and in that feedback, you can tell them directly. The only feedback I have for you on this is that if the open gaming license comes out, none of this is going to goddamn matter because I'm not going to be playing your fucking game, right? You can make TikToks about it. You can make YouTube videos about it. You can email them and post on their social medias, tag them in tweets and stuff like that, and tell them this is fucking unacceptable.
And let's just clarify. Because even though we've talked about the problems, we haven't said this explicitly why this is all. This is attacking people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
There are people who have made it their life's work to grow this hobby, to make it the best hobby it can be. And this is them just coming in and saying, we want to take a cut of the pie from you for work that you're doing. Simply because it uses rules that we wrote 30 years ago.
Exactly. And by the way, rules that none of them wrote 30 years ago.
None of them ruled. Yes. Yeah. None of the people there.
And this isn't me fucking edifying goddamn Gary Gygax. The dude was a racist and a sexist and does not deserve that. But like, this is about the fact that when 3rd edition came out and everything, it was a great system that helped expand Dungeons and Dragons to a bigger audience. And then they released 4th edition, which had some good points in it, but ultimately was very unsuccessful. And in releasing 4th edition, they did an update for the open gaming license for things that included that, and it sent companies running to compete with them because they saw that in there. But now with 5th edition having existed for 8 going on 9 years, we've seen the hobby blow up in a way that it hasn't, and D&D deserves credit for that because they're the ones that figured it out. And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but they have a multi-billion-dollar company. They had that company during 4th edition and it didn't work out. So the people working at WotC, the people that use D&D to entertain us in podcasts and streams, the people that popularized the hobby on the ground at game stores with their friends, all of those people did that. But another section that deeply expanded it was people publishing third-party content that met the needs of the players more than Wizards was ever going to, simply by volume and because of different perspectives. And those people earned that money. They earned it. They earned it by making it, and they only made more money for Wizards. And now they're going to come and turn around and be like, well, screw all of your effort. I get that you did it for yourself, but you've also benefited us. I'm going to ignore that and completely try and rob you out of this hobby.
I want to point out something else. You've heard us mention Pathfinder, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go to Pathfinder. It's too much rules. One of the best things about Pathfinder is all of their non-campaign based content is underneath their OGL. All of it. So like, you want the advanced player's guide, the advanced ancestry guide, the advanced class guide, all of that stuff is online for free. You don't even need the books.
And I don't want to hear about too much rules. It's slightly crunchier than D&D, slightly, but I think a lot of people are like, it's too much rules. You're looking at it from someone who already knows the system you're leaving, not from someone who has to learn it. If I sat down at a table and I didn't know how to onboard new players, I could bury them in rules. Magic casting rules, action economy rules, armor class rules, and everything. What do we do at the table with those people? Don't worry about it. We're just going to set you up. We're going to get you good and solid.
We're going to give you a character sheet.
Give you a character sheet. We're going to get you set up with that. And then I'm going to tell you what die to roll and then tell you what stat to add to it. You don't need to understand the rules. I'm literally pointing the numbers out to you and giving you the commands. And then over time, you will learn through repetition what those are and what you can kind of expect. And it might be one session, it might be several sessions, but you'll get there. Pathfinder is not different than that. It's not. It's very much the same as that, which makes sense because it was a spin-off of 3rd edition. It was a direct response to 4th edition. It was absolutely more of that. It just kept some of the crunchier rules. And yeah, if you look at all of the supplements and all of the Pathfinder content now, it seems overwhelming. But imagine getting into 5th edition in 2022 with all of those books and all of those supplements.
That too. How many who out there who plays D&D, you've played D&D with house rules?
100% of people. Like
anyone who's run a game more than once
has absolutely
runs house rules on D&D.
Yeah, we all do.
What is house rule? It's just a new rule that you've added that makes the game crunchier.
Yeah, crunchier,
have more
rules or dismisses rules, and then you have to remember that rule is dismissed. It changes things. Like there are so many great TTRPG publishers came out of the idea of modifying D&D content and then eventually making their own thing. So many have come out of that. And if this comes out, if WotC and Hasbro release this version, it's not going to end TTRPG growth. What's funny about it is it will only expand non-D20, non-D&D related content, and it will put a nail in the coffin of D&D for several years until eventually they want to unload the IP, and then someone else comes and buys it. In a poetic way, in my mind, that's when it's almost valueless, and then some company like Paizo comes and scoops it up. But in reality, it will be some other major giant corporate entity that would understand how to license its IP everywhere. So really all this is doing is harming individuals in the short term and deeply affecting their lives. And when I say short term, I mean years, but I don't mean like there's no reason for this property to die. And then again, if you still want to play it, feel free to play it. Just don't give Wizards any of your money. Just don't give them your money.
Let's be real. Let's say in the crazy crazy world that for some reason a court actually sides with Wizards and invalidates the old OGL, and then suddenly Pathfinder's entire product line is ruled as copyright infringing or in violation of a license. Do you think what's going to happen is Paizo will continue publishing their stuff for a few years underneath their agreement, but I don't think that'll fly because of at no point in the past was Paizo given the option of letting Wizards have access to their content, and to force that on them for the material that they've already published would be absolutely insane for any court to do. But then give them a few years, and they'll have a new system that completely abandons the old way of doing things.
Yep.
And you'll see what's going to happen is every single company that has built their history on the OGL is going to either find a new OGL to latch onto, like Free League, or they're going to create their own systems.
100%.
They're going to latch onto an OGL that is more open, more free, and gives them the same creative license that the old OGL had under D&D, and that's where the community will move.
100%. I think because it's the end of the video, so hopefully no one that cares will find this. I'm going to give you a couple quick tips on how to obtain Wizards material without giving them a dime. The first one is a little website called anyflip.com. Anyflip.com is a web interface PDF hosting, and if you go to anyflip.com or you just type in the words anyflip and then any of the D&D books, You'll find them on there, completely published in high resolution, able to be searched as a PDF for the terminologies of there. And if you're real clever, you'll be able to then get a hold of that PDF. You can also, there's a number of websites that you can find. Look into GitHub. And you will find a lot of materials on there. Because I don't want to just not give WotC money. I want them to lose money. I want them to lose money on this. I want product from theirs taken from them like they're taking other people's product with something like this. And that's if it releases. If it doesn't release and they don't release, and they release something that says, hey, we're not going to do that, we're never going to do that, here's an ironclad thing, says that we're never going to do that, then fine, they've dodged this bullet. But that'll be thanks to some employee at WotC that helped leak this and make sure that it got out in front of it in first. But like, as a person that's given them thousands of dollars in the last, 8 years or so, 7 years, as a person that's given them thousands of dollars, and a little bit before that with 4th edition, hundreds of dollars with 4th edition, and then however long my D&D Beyond subscription has been going, buying D&D merchandise as far as like shirts and shit like that. As a person that's thrown a bunch of money at this particular company, they've lost me until they can fix their shit. They already had lost me in a lot of ways, but I wasn't going to cancel my D&D Beyond subscription. I just wasn't going to buy new shit on it. And now they've lost now when that runs up on my annual, unless this is resolved, I'm going to pull all that information down because I paid for it. And then I'm going to abandon the platform. Which means that someone that literally was throwing them 100% of the money they were asking for every year is not going to be giving them money. And I expect a lot of people will do the same. This will go down as IP, like, self-destruct if they actually release this. It will be like a business class lesson in IP. It's the same reason that Disney doesn't come through and attack artists in artist alleys at comic book conventions that use their characters on prints, right? It's the same reason that like most IPs don't care if you make web comics with their characters and stuff like that, and you make money off of advertising or Patreon and stuff like that. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's guarded by parody or it's guarded by satire and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's not. It's just that the IP understands what's the bad look. And a lot of people say, well, copyright has to defend itself across the board. That is simply not the case. And there are tons of court cases that have done that. Wizards could absolutely defend themselves on a corporate way from someone disingenuously using an open gaming license to misrepresent themselves as official Wizards content, and tear them apart, and leave third-party creators alone. They could absolutely do that. So please feel free to try out any of these excellent RPGs. Take the opportunity to expand your horizons. If you want to continue to play D&D, feel free to give Wizards no money, and in fact encourage other people to not give them money, and instead just take from them. Because they can't stop the internet being the internet, and they're not going to stop that. And if you remember any two websites, anyflip.com, github.com, just look up Wizards books. I'm sure you'll find materials. There's also third-party apps that can aggregate and organize them a little better that you can pull content from places like GitHub into, and not give them a dime. And I'm not for stealing creative efforts stuff just on random, but I'm also not against it when a company is acting as predatory as Hasbro is appearing like they're looking to act. Any last words from you, Brandon, before we head out for the evening and return in 2 weeks with a much happier topic?
No, I'll just say that Brennan Lee Mulligan is right, and that the villain is always capitalism.
The villain is always capitalism. Oh, in other news that may or may not be D&D related, but is actual play podcast related, look up Worlds Beyond Number. Worlds Beyond Number?
Yes, which is weird because we just talked about Worlds Without Number.
Yeah, Beyond Number. New podcast, new actual play podcast. With Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Erica Ishii, and Lou Wilson, an absolute star-studded cast. They're doing the hype train stuff now, of releasing a little bit of information every week about it in January, and then in February for Patreon people, they're going to release some behind-the-scenes and Session Zero stuff. The first campaign is called The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, which we love to fucking see it. And that will be DM'd by Brennan as a completely new setting unrelated to any of the Dimension 20 stuff. I'm gonna guess it's probably in a D&D system. I'm guessing it is, because they've already apparently done all their Session Zero, but there's some interesting things that they're doing for the Patreon and stuff like that. In March, you'll be able to listen to it where podcasts are for the regular episodes, and everything. But they're gonna have different one shots and different games and different they're gonna rotate in different all four of those people have run games, and so they'll have different people DMing for different things. This first one is an ongoing campaign, but they've already said that it won't be the only thing in the feed, right? So they might, take a break from that campaign and do like a short run of something else or a one shot of something else with someone else DMing. I'm very excited about it. It's fixing to be one of the best things in Dungeons or in actual play, like streaming and or podcasts, that's come out in a long time. And it's going to be right up there with Dimension 20 for Critical Role fans. Critical Role, Dungeons and Daddies, NADPOD, all of the like big the Adventure Zone when Griffin's running it. All of the heaviest hitters in the space. This will fit in perfectly with them. So get excited for that. That's worldsbeyondnumber.com, where you can get information and know that it's going to be, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty hot actual play, and it's it's creator owned, which means that the people that are getting the money from it are the people that are playing in it, and contributing to it, which is expected, but just to make that clear. All right, Brandon, how about we say we're good for the night and say our goodbyes, and then we'll be back in a couple weeks with a more positive topic on January 23rd.
I think we still had a pretty positive topic. We promoted a bunch.
We promoted a bunch of fucking just banger RPGs.
Yeah,
just banger RPGs.
I just think the positivity is, y'all can. There are great games out there. You don't look at a video game and say, I can't play this because I don't know the mechanics.
You learn
same thing. You can do, if you can learn a video game, a complex video game, you can learn a new TTRPG.
If you don't like reading, go to YouTube, type in this RPG, how do I play it? And there'll be an explainer video. There might even be an actual play series if you're a fan of watching those or listening to them that are in that RPG setting.
I know for most of the ones I have over here, you can absolutely find footage of people playing.
Exactly. So, thank you. I've been Steve. I've been joined by the illustrious Brandon. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Questboard Gaming that will hopefully at least be able to say, yeah, remember that OGL thing? Here's an update on it. It's not happening. It's not happening. That's the hope. I hope at least that. But anyway, thank you for joining us, Riot, Ryle's Only One Ronin, anyone that hopped in, anyone that's watching this on Twitch or on the VOD on YouTube at Dying of Exposure or youtube.com/Dying of Exposure. Follow Twitter at Dying of Exposure for updates on when we will do this. Usually it's on every other Monday, but sometimes we have to move it around. And also follow us here on Twitch for any other tabletop streaming or my RPG streams during lunch rush, where I play video games instead of work. Anyway, goodbye.